I've been fortunate enough through my involvement in the coffee trade to spend a relatively significant amount of time at Origin, meeting with a lot of the kind of farmers that you guys source your coffee from. So since we started to have the volumes, last 5 or 6 years, to buy directly from cooperatives, I've made visits to dozens of farmer groups in 10 countries around the world, and starts to paint a picture of what's going on out there, which I think helps me to contribute to the discussion that you're involved in around sustainability. I'll just figure the system out. I'll be underway. Cool. I think what we're talking about isn't particular coffee at all, actually. This is a World Bank graph which shows inflation-adjusted return on units of a basket of agricultural products over the last century. And you can see the trend is grindingly downhill from a scale of 100, index of 100 down to about 35 today. And my father was a sheep farmer, and he predominantly produced wool. And I was telling him the story about how in real terms, the value of coffee today is the same as it was 30 years ago, even forgetting about inflation. He said, yeah, talk to me about wool, it's the same thing. The other thing about wool is there's only half the number of sheep in New Zealand as there was 30 years ago. Slight difference between wool and coffee perhaps is that there's been a shift away from wool into synthetics. Still strong demand for coffee, but we'll see a similar trend. I think where people like my father had advantages as they went about their business was that they had access to capital. Usually they could diversify out of whatever it was that they were growing, that they didn't get a significant enough return from. They could bring capital to their advantage to produce new technology which might help them to increase their yields, might help them to increase the amount of land that they have, can help in various ways. They can bring in efficiencies in production, can help them to scale up. A lot of those advantages are not available to coffee growers around the world. They do not have access to capital, and it stuffs them. They're caught in what's called a cycle of poverty. They're stuck growing coffee often because, and people ask the questions here today, what about other things they can grow? They find it really hard to grow other things that will give them a viable return. They may grow some bananas on the side, they may have some other crops, but what they say to me is, it's what pays for the school fees. It's the coffee, it's always the coffee. So they've got coffee whether they want it or not. And this is specific to coffee. I've used International Coffee Organization figures that go back to 1976. This is inflation-adjusted coffee prices over the last 30-odd years. And what I take from this, when I think of the discussions that I have with coffee farmers, is we reached a critical point right about here, about the time that the International Coffee Agreement collapsed, 1989. Since that time, I've seen a lot of coffee farmers who have not had the ability, from the prices that they're getting, to reinvest back in their coffee farms. Trees are getting older. Their kids are not taking up the challenge of farming coffee. They've shot through. And I think we're paying the price now. I think one little trend I mentioned in passing, it's not because coffee has lost value overall. In fact, these stats show that from 1987 to 2004, the retail value of coffee grew from $30 billion to $70 billion. But the return that goes to producer countries has shrunk from $9 billion to $5 billion in the same period. So they're only getting a quarter the share of the pie they used to get. That's the free market. That's where it's taking us. And if you are a young potential coffee farmer today, and you look at what's going on for your parents, I ask a lot of coffee farmers what they want their kids to do. And very, very few have said, I want my son to grow coffee just like I did. They want them to do anything else. They want them to become a doctor, teacher, something that will help support the community. This is the last thing they wish on them. This is what we're going to turn around if the industry is to really, truly become sustainable. I'm talking about the farmers that I meet. They're small-scale coffee farmers who on average grow coffee on about 2 hectares of land. But they dominate production. In some countries, as high as 95–100% of the coffee that will come. Yes, there's estates and plantations. I'm talking about small farmers, but they're the bread and butter of the specialty coffee industry. What goes for them impacts on us all. So they like food security. There's a time, there was a session at the Specialty Coffee Association conference this year called Hunger in Coffee. People in coffee saying, what are we going to do about this? We recognise there's this problem all through Mesoamerica where farmers from May to September, they run out of money, they have nothing to use to buy food. They're called los meses flacos, the lean months. They just make do as best they can, so that they're unable to provide themselves and their families with adequate nutrition. Limited access to healthcare. Lots of places in Africa we buy from, there's no clinics. People are dying from the most simply treatable diseases like malaria, which is spreading with changes in temperature. Maternal childbirth death, it's massive for them. Lack of access to clean water supplies. The cooperatives we buy from, they've got a list of things, as long as there are, that they're trying to work on together to improve development. Water's big for them, and it's not just if it's clean or not, it's how far they have to go to get it. Sometimes they have to travel hours each way, every day, and that's one of the reasons why kids aren't in school. The family can't afford the kid to not go and collect the water, it's their job. And sometimes the kids don't have a school to go to anyway, and certainly in parts of Ethiopia, first priority for the Oromia cooperative is actually put in first primary school. They then will love if they could get enough income from the coffee that they're growing to take their people down a path so that they actually acquire a higher education, which might lead on to meaningful employment in the future. So that's the picture out in a lot of places where your coffee is coming from. Chris maybe doesn't know, I threw in a few graphs which I think help to illustrate a few points. On the International Coffee Organisation website, there's lots of production figures for various countries, and as far as I can tell, the data is reliable. I think it's good to go with. But because coffee production around the world goes up and down in high and low production years, it's kind of hard to look at the data. So I've had a look at a way to give it more meaning and show the trends more recently. I use a 10-year moving average, which takes out a particularly bad or good production year, depending on how the weather's gone. What it would mean, this is all the coffee in the world that's grown, and it's your Robusta that doesn't get sorted from your ripe and your unripe, it's your Cup of Excellence, it's everything in between, it's all the Arabicas, the Würzburger. And actually the last couple of years, it dipped down a wee bit. There's been quite a lot of weather events around the world that have contributed to that. What it means is, right now, there's less coffee getting grown in the world than there was 10 years ago. What I would have loved to have had, but I just couldn't quite get enough of the right data to overlay it, is how demand is trending. Last 5 years, on average, people have drunk 5 million more bags worth of coffee than has been produced. So now we're at a point where everyone's hopefully thinking, oh, it's going to pick up again, but it hasn't happened yet. Country by country, there's a lot of variations for various factors. I wrote recently about a situation in El Salvador where a lot of coffee in the country is grown on estates, but an awful lot of small producer production as well. They had a very difficult time with the Civil War up until the early 80s, where people went out to battle on the farm, it just wasn't safe to do so. And so the farms got neglected, their usual management process fell apart, and now they're paying the price. This is a grindingly downhill trend in production in El Salvador as a result. But they can go the other way. Here we've got Ethiopia, where we're seeing quite a strong increase in production. Possibly we could say it's flow on, we could say because it's a 10-year moving average, you've got to look back, but it had come out of a period where there had been a lot of civil war, Eritrea, Tigray, Ethiopia. They've had an established government, it's been quite effective, I'd say, at liberalising the economy, which is, I think, among other factors, it's allowed people like us to buy directly from co-ops rather than through the old auction system and so forth. So I think those are helping. Certainly at farmer level, the returns they're getting in Ethiopia now compared with even 5 years ago, it's significant. Double, treble the price they used to get. Here's Vietnam. How many people here buy Vietnam Robusta? Thank you. But it's not widely used within the industry. But that's where we've seen dramatic growth as a result of an IMF restructuring program. They need to refinance their debt. Farmers are planting a lot of coffee, and it's come on stream from about 15 years ago, and massive growth. Take Vietnam out, total production worldwide is not flatlining, but it's not growing by much at all, and demand is increasing every year, and especially in producer countries. One of the key issues that's being raised and talked about through especially coffee is the impact of Brazilian consumption, Mexican consumption, and so forth. It's all starting to impact on the kind of coffees that we're all able to access. Here's Kenya.